Good evening and welcome to another in these Steam Paper interviews. Don't forget we're building up to the Steampunk Over Ether Festival, which is going on 25th, 26th of April, a virtual steampunk festival for everybody to take part in and come along. We've got some great content lined up. I had some more fantastic content turn up today that I'm really pleased about. I've got some more people responding, so it's looking really good at the moment. I'm going to try and do the scheduling at the weekend, so I'll have a better idea of what we've got to show you, and I'll be talking about it next week. Also got some great interviews lined up next week as well, so I won't talk about those just yet, but I can tell you they're going to be really good. We've got some big stars of the steampunk scene lined up, ready to chat to you, take your questions, and so on. So so we're still looking for people to send in their videos. So if you want to do a performance, or if you want to do a reading, or if you have something you want to show us, like a costume or a gadget, or perhaps a steampunk teddy bear, whatever you're doing, please send us a little video, little short clip, and showing us and telling us all about it. That would be brilliant. Now, I've got a fantastic guest tonight, and by way of an introduction, I'm going to play a little bit of her show reel, which will give you an idea. For those of you unfamiliar with her, and really you should definitely follow her on Facebook and check her out. She's fantastic. So I'm just going to play this video for you so you can get an idea of who she is and what she does. To the program, the lovely Scarlet Butterfly. Hello, Scarlet.
Good evening.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's a beautiful evening. So.
Good, yeah. Yes, it's which part of the country are you in, roughly?
I'm in Huddersfield, West Yorkshire.
All right. Well, I'm down south of Leicester, and it's been a lovely day here as well. So, I suppose really we should, we've seen some of the things you do. So tell us how you got started in all this. How did you get started in the athletic world of dancing around a pole?
Well, I guess I was always a dancer. I danced from being very young, from sort of 6, 7 years old. I went to ballet dancing classes. And then when I got older, about sort of 12, 13 years ago, I suddenly discovered pole dance. I'm not quite sure how I even came to it. I think it just came into my head, and I just thought I'd really like to try that. And there was some local classes, so I went to the class and actually found that I was quite good at it. I sort of took to it quite naturally. And a lot of the ballet sort of moves that I had, I think it's a discipline that stays with you, even though I hadn't done it for a long time. It sort of all came back, and I just loved it. And I then sort of religiously went to classes every week, and I've never stopped. So here we are 12, 13 years later, and I'm still doing it.
Cool. So obviously, I'm interviewing you for Steam Paper, and I know, you're a very popular steampunk community. How did you actually get involved with steampunk in the first place? when did you first learn of it, and how did you kind of get involved with that?
Well, I from about the age of sort of 15, 16, I was always, in inverted commas, an alternative. I was never the same. I was never very mainstream. I always hung out with the alternative crowd. I was a goth. I was a rocker. It's always been part of who I am. And so, of course, the Whitby Goth Weekend always has appealed to me.
Yeah.
And I went to the Whitby Goth Weekend, gosh, about 8 years ago, and discovered steampunk. There were all these steampunks wandering around, and I had never seen it before. And I was absolutely fascinated. And from that point onwards, I started to become interested, and I wanted to learn more. And here I am now. I am one.
So now you've got. We saw from that show reel you've got quite a lot of different acts, and I thought I might just show a few pictures while we chat. So I'm just going to show some of these pictures, and then if you kind of talk us through some of these acts. I mean, first of all, that's an amazing position. You're completely upside down. What is that? Do all these positions have a name? And if so,
yes, they do.
Okay.
They do. And to be quite honest, I don't always know all of the names of all of them. But I think the one that you're seeing in that picture there is called the Hanged Man.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that makes sense.
Yes.
And we should just say these pictures are taken by some fantastic photographers. So I think this one is by Neil Rylett. Is that right?
So Neil Rylett took this picture, and this was an incredible one of my most amazing performance experiences ever. It was last October, and I was invited to perform in a show called Burlesque Noir, which is the kind of biggest burlesque show really in the UK, and it's promoted and organised by Raven Noir, who a lot of steampunks actually love. She's quite well known as a performer herself, very well known, and it was in the Blackpool Tower Ballroom. So to be able to perform on that stage was an absolute dream. It really was. That was an amazing shot that Neil just happened to just capture mid performance.
Yeah, it's perfect. And then there's this one, which is very dramatic. The lighting and everything is very dramatic. Another one of Neil's. So what was the venue for this one? Because that looks quite impressive.
Well, so 2 months after the Burlesque Noir show, I was back in Blackpool, this time at the Winter Gardens, to perform at a show called The Trip to the Moon, which is a show organised by an incredible guy called Neil Kendall. And his attention to detail is something else with his shows, and that's why the lighting is so good. So that was another exceptionally prestigious event, and it was a pleasure to be able to perform there as well.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can pop you up on screen, actually. Oh, no, I can't. Okay. I won't try that again. And then we've got this picture, which again is a lovely shot of you with what I believe is called a lyrapole. We're going to talk about that in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a version of a move called a Delilah. And again, that picture was taken of me at the Blackpool Tower Ballroom. Yeah. Again, mid flow.
And then this one is from a pirate themed show you do, which is one of my favourites actually. I really like this one. It's very athletic, and it's I like the way you use the props as well. The props are really good.
Yeah, you see, I'm always looking for novel ways to perform, rather than that kind of expected sort of more traditional way that you see people performing pole. I don't really want to do that. I like to do something different. So what I did with this act was I decided that I would turn my pole into the mast of a ship. So that's what I did. So I got a crossbar that kind of sits across the top of the pole, and then I got the silks. And so the idea of the act is that I'm a kind of a a pirate girl sort of preparing for battle, and it's in rough seas, and so I'm rocking and rolling all over the place and trying to keep control, and I have rope swings attached to the top of the pole during that act as well, and then halfway that comes off, and then I let down the sails, swing around in the sails, and then right at the end it sort of finishes on the finale with me climbing right to the top of the pole and raising a gun in the air, and there's a huge bang, and it's all very dramatic.
It's
and,
a great, like I say, it's one of my favorites. It's a great one, that one.
Yeah.
And then this is again another fantastic photograph, but also another fantastic setting.
Yeah, so that picture was taken by a photographer called Nick Walsh, and it was taken at Wortley Top Forge, which is actually only about half an hour's drive from where I live. It's near Sheffield. And about once a year, the lovely Beverly Thornton, who a lot of steampunks will know because she's well known in the community as a photographer, she organises an event, a photo shoot event there, and I've always gone along. And there were about kind of 20 steampunks and about the same number of photographers, and we kind of move around the venue all day. And at the end of the day on this particular event, I took all my fire gear and I did a fire show at the end, and Nick managed to just capture that picture, and I'm wearing a post-apocalyptic outfit there. The whole day was the theme of the photo shoot was post-apocalyptic, so we were all dressed up that way for that particular shoot.
Terrific. Oh, sorry. And another fire one. This is another great. This is on stage somewhere.
Yeah, so that was at the Asylum last October. So sorry, not October, last August. At the Major Soiree, which is the awesome cabaret show, sort of variety show that it always kicks off the Friday night kind of the event. Really, it's one of the first shows that they put on, and that's where I performed my fire act. So that was pretty awesome because they've got an absolutely massive stage down in the engine shed. Yeah. So I was able to do big fire,
big fire.
Which is what you can see there.
Yeah. I think that's on your. Is that on your YouTube channel? I believe that.
Yes, there is a video of that performance. It's available on YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll come to where people can see and get in touch later on. So this is again. Is this from the Pirate Act?
So it is. That's kind of again midway through. You can see at that point in the performance, I haven't actually let down the sails, and I'm still swinging around on the rope.
Yeah.
Well. That was taken at the Drill Hall in Lincoln. So we had a show there a couple of years ago, and there were some really amazing performers there. So that was a really good show. Cool.
And the last one, I know you've had a kind of a long-standing kind of relationship with the photographer who took this picture, Gary Nichols, and the Imaginarium project that he does. But this one is actually you as Alice, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's a burlesque act. So I absolutely love burlesque, and it was one of the things that really sort of inspired me to start stage performing. So I'm very influenced by burlesque, and I perform in a lot of burlesque shows, but I tend to be an aerial artist. I'm not really a floor-based, throw your clothes off kind of performer, but it is quite liberating to do that. Yeah. So I do have one act, and that is it. And it's a steampunk Alice in Wonderland. So the idea is that she kind of is all confused, and she falls down the rabbit hole, and then she comes out into the garden through the little door, and then she kind of throws caution to the wind and kind of just throws all the clothes off. Quite good fun. But so that photograph was taken by Gary Nichols. He I think everyone will know Gary as the orchestrator or creator of the Imaginarium, and I have been part of that project really right from the beginning with a lot of other people. There's a group of us that have had characters, and Gary is absolutely amazing. So I asked him, would he do some promotional shots for me, and he's done a couple of my other act, but this is a promotional shot that he did for me very kindly of my Alice in Wonderland act. So yeah, it's a great shot.
He's even got me in the next book, I believe.
Yes.
I've been typecast as the villain, which is
you are the
wrong.
serial killer.
Yeah, I know. It's like a go from comedian to serial killer. How do you manage that? I don't know.
I think you're great. You're going to play a great serial killer.
So we've had a few questions come in, and one I was going to say was so Malika was asking, how do you select the themes for your acts? Where do you get the ideas from, and does the music come first, or does the idea come first?
That's a great question. Yeah. So I'm always looking for new ideas, and sometimes things will just come to me, but I'm very inspired by anything that's off the wall, really, anything that's a little bit different. So things like fairies, fantasy creatures, pirates, all that sort of thing. So I tend to just gravitate towards that, and it's those things that tend to influence my performances. And I just love beautiful aesthetics. I just love things to look gorgeous as well. So things like the fire act that you just seen a picture of me doing at Blackpool, that's I call that act Fire and Ice, and it's kind of like like a bit of an evil Narnia style ice queen that balances the elements by overpowering fire, because an ice queen shouldn't be able to do that with fire, really. She should be frightened of the fire. Yeah. So it's all a little bit. So I tend to think of the character or the idea, and then I will search for the music that I think works, and I will create the costume. So it's always the idea first, and then the costume and the music next. Yeah.
And Malika's also asked, which is relevant, do you make your own costumes?
It's a combination of. So the Fire and Ice costume was largely made by me completely, other than the headdress, which was made by Hysteria Machine, which is they're a maker in London based, and the corset, which was made by White Phantom.
Yes.
She makes pretty much all of my corsets because I just respect her so much as a corset. Yep. Yeah, she's incredible. So she pretty much makes all of mine. So what I'm quite good at is I'm all right at headdresses, and obviously things like these.
Yes, they've become your trademark, haven't they?
Yeah, they're my trademark. So I'm good at making things like that. I'm good at customizing items and embellishing them. I'm great at that. But anything that needs an actual piece of clothing, like a corset or a cloak or a skirt or something like that, I have no idea what I'm doing with a sewing machine. So I will look around to find people that can work with me on costume pieces. I have just this week actually found somebody who is going to work with me. She's a metal worker and a jeweler, and she's going to create for me a headdress which has prongs going off it and wicks, so that I can actually have a fire headdress.
All right, okay.
So that's going to be coming a new act later this year.
I was going to ask you about what you're working on. So that's obviously one thing. Now we've got the lovely Yoms is with us, and he's saying, "Can you kindly tell us about the Absinthe Fairy Act that you did at the asylum?" I don't think that's one I've seen.
Yoms knows all about that act.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. He does.
So my Absinthe Fairy. Yeah, so I kind of had this great idea about another fairy because I just love fairies, as I've already said. And the Absinthe Fairy was an idea I had. I've seen a number of burlesque acts that use the Absinthe Fairy character, but it's usually a very light-hearted kind of, I'm going to drink the absinthe, and then suddenly all my inhibitions have gone, and I'm going to take my clothes off because I'm drunk, kind of thing. And and I just decided that actually I wanted to show a darker side to the Absinthe Fairy, because she kind of, the idea of absinthe, I mean, people's minds would be completely bent by that drink. You know, there was a psychoactive element within it that actually did interesting things to people's brains, and I just thought maybe I could do an act where the character is actually quite an evil fairy who's trying to bend people's mind and send them a little bit crazy. And so that's what I did with the Absinthe Fairy act. Yeah. So it's a little bit dark, that one.
Yeah. Now you mentioned performing alongside burlesque acts and so on. Are there any particular performers that you admire, either from the world of burlesque or the world of steampunk?
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, I would say that Raven Noir is probably one of my favourite performers. She does things that I don't do at all. She's a completely different performer to me, but she was one of the first burlesque performers that ever really came onto my radar when I started to become interested in the whole burlesque and cabaret world. And I remember going to a festival and actually seeing her perform and being really excited about the fact that she was there performing. And actually, it turned out that a couple of months later, I was doing my first ever show, and I got to share a dressing room with her because she was performing in the show, and we just got on like a house on fire. We got on really well. Yeah, I've been friends ever since. But I really do admire her as a performer because her stage presence is just absolutely out of this world. You know, she steps onto a stage, and she doesn't necessarily do a great deal. It's just the way that she holds the audience. You cannot take your eyes off her. You know, the minute she's on the stage to the moment that she leaves, you won't look anywhere but at her. She's incredible. She's really, really mesmerizing. So I do really admire her particularly.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Now I was going to ask you, you've been performing on the pole for quite a while. But now you're doing something different. You seem to like a challenge. You don't like making things too easy for yourself. So now I believe you're working on something called the lyrapole. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so it's the lyrapole is it's basically a hybrid piece of equipment that is it's called a lyrapole because you'll have seen circus performers hanging on hoops, which are just free hanging hoops, and they move around and perform inside the hoop. So that's called a lyra. It's a posh word for a hoop, basically. So the lyra pole is basically a combination of a hoop and a pole, and it's also known as a lollipop. Yes. It's a piece of equipment that was produced by a company called X Pole. They're the leading kind of manufacturer, really, in pole equipment. And my X stage that I lug around all over the country performing on, it was produced by them, but they produced it only about 6 or 7 years ago. It's very new. There are very few people actually performing lyrapole at the moment. I saw one at the yoga show a couple of years ago, and I thought, that's what I want to try. I really, really do. I think it's really fascinating. It's just so dynamic. And so I invested in one, and just over a year ago, so last January, I started to train with the lyrapole, and actually I hadn't got a clue what I was doing with it. You know, there was nobody I knew that was using a lyrapole. I watched there's a number of YouTube videos, but not a great deal. And I literally had to teach myself how to perform on it. But I absolutely love it. I like it better than the pole.
that probably brings me on to another question, another area, which is one of the things I admire about your act is it's very athletic, it's very gymnastic.
Thank you.
And so it's not just the graceful moves. It's the amount of I mean, you make it look easy, but actually there's an awful lot of athleticism in there, and obviously a lot of training, a lot of physical training. Yeah. So now normally you must do quite a lot of training, but how have you been managing Because presumably you would do that at a gym or at a dance place or so on. So how have you been managing at the moment? I'm gonna switch to another screen here, and we're gonna just show this. So tell me a little bit uh, about your
Yeah.
training regime and what you're doing now. Now you can't get to a gym or a training place.
So I live in Huddersfield, and Huddersfield is very famous for tiny little weavers' cottages, and I live in one of them. It's tiny, absolutely, it's charming, absolutely charming little cottage, but it's very, very small. So I train. I mean, I religiously train on a Sunday, and I often put my training videos up onto my Facebook feed, which a lot of people follow. So people can see how I'm doing with my training. But of course, the wonderful gym where I go has had to close because of the COVID-19 situation. And so I had to get my lyrapole out of there, and I had to bring it home with me. So I did, but of course there's nowhere to actually put it up in my house. So what I had to do was to put it into the garden. But the challenge for me is that my garden is absolutely the steepest garden you will ever have seen in your life. You have to kind of go to the upstairs level, and then my back door is actually upstairs. My house, it's just an old crooked cottage. And then you go out of the back door, and then you have to go up a numerous flights of stairs because it's all terraced, and there's 3 levels to my garden. And when you actually get to the top, I have this lovely decked area, which is what you can see in the video there. And it's well above the roof line of the cottage. So it is like you're on top of the world when you get up there. Wonderful.
A good view.
It's a fantastic view. Yeah, you can't see it from that angle. But it's such a challenge because the equipment is extremely heavy. It's anyone who's helped me. You've helped me yourself.
I can vouch for the fact that it is very, very heavy. Yes,
absolutely, it's really heavy. So I've got to kind of lug it all the way up to the top of the garden, get it all set up, then do my training, which is hard work. Then pack it all down, get it back down. And having to do that every time I need to train is pretty tiresome, actually. And also the decking itself is not level. I'm actually in the video there. You can see I'm actually not getting a bad spin, but that's because I'm on the outside of the hoop. As soon as I jump up and get inside of the hoop and try to do anything inside it, it tends to just stop or start swinging the opposite direction. So it's really difficult to control. It's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. So one question I had was, what do the neighbours think?
Well, I know a few people have asked me that question, actually. Luckily, it's pretty much only ever me up there. The neighbours either side tend just never to be there, really. However, 2 weekends ago, I've got a new neighbour on one side, and she's got some people that live there with her, but they're not always there. It's a bit strange. I've no idea. But anyway, they all came up to the garden, and as I was training, I just thought, oh no, this is just not what I need at all. So, and I kind of just said to them, I hope you don't mind. I hope my music isn't bothering you. No, they were fine with that. And of course they were like, well, what's that? So they were full of questions, so I had to explain to them, and they were, I had to tell them why I was doing what I was doing. So they kind of sat and got on with what they were doing, but of course they did keep watching.
Well, I think anybody would. It's mesmerising most of the time. So you've been doing the pole. You've been doing and I did pronounce it wrong, didn't I? It's the lyrapole. I was going to call it lyrapole for some reason. But you've also been learning about fire skills, as we saw in the thing. So how did the fire come about?
Okay. So the fire, again, this came from the burlesque world. So I'd been about 2 years into my burlesque and cabaret career, and I went to a show in Sheffield with some friends at the lead mill there, and a performer came onto the stage called Aurora Star, Absolutely stunningly beautiful woman. She was just mesmerizing, and she came onto the stage and she just did this fire act with these big fire fans, and I just watched it and I was completely transfixed, and I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. I really want to do that. I love dangerous things, you know. I used to jump out of planes kind of like every weekend for about 6 years. I am a skydiver, although I haven't skydived in a long time now because I've been performing instead. But I just seem to gravitate towards dangerous things. So the fire was just ideal for me. So I found somebody called Red Sarah, who has a school in London called the Fire School, and she's really the only person in the country that has any kind of setup like that, and she is amazing. I booked some training with her and I went down, and she literally spent an hour with me before we even got any matches or lighters out. She spent an hour with me just explaining about different fuel types, going through the safety side of things. And then I learned how to fire eat. I learned the basics around sort of body burning and things. And then from there, I just built up, and I went back numerous times for different kind of training with her. I've had advanced training with her in different things. And then I started working those skills into my performances, and I really love performing fire. I just, it's terrifying. It's an adrenaline rush, but it just looks amazing. And when I can combine it with beautiful costumes and things, I just adore it. It's really good.
Well, I was watching the show reel, and at one point you run the lighted brands down your arms, and I was just thinking, well, that saves waxing, doesn't it? Really?
Yeah, it does. Everyone says that, and it actually does take the hairs off your arms. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got quite a lot of hair on my arms, so I don't think I better try it. I think I'd probably burst into flames. So now, obviously, you do this performing, but this isn't your full-time job. You actually have a full-time.
No.
And when I know some time ago, because we did have a chat at the asylum a couple of years back, and when I found out what you did, it was quite. I found it quite interesting and quite a revelation. So tell us what it is that you actually do.
So I am a university lecturer, and that's my day job. And my job title is Senior Lecturer in Research and Evidence-Based Practice.
Right.
So what I do is I'm actually a librarian by background. So I've been as a librarian. That's my original profession. And when I left my degree, of course, when you graduate, you just want it. You go for any job you can. And I ended up working for the Department of Health in the library services there. And so I developed a subject specialism in health. And I went then and worked in the NHS. I worked with clinical teams, kind of searching for the evidence to help inform clinical decisions. So I did that, and then I went into an academic role, and I've been doing that for quite a long time now. And I work mainly on occupational therapy, physiotherapy, and health masters programs and continuing professional development programs. And I teach people mainly how to deal with health information, how to find it, how to critically appraise it, and how to apply it in health practice. And I also teach a lot of research methods, and I'm a researcher myself. I have a PhD, so I'm known as Dr. Hannah Spring in my kind of day job.
Another doctor. We've got quite a few doctors in the steampunk world, I think it seems.
Yeah.
Well, that's quite amazing. I mean, that's obviously also quite. I imagine that's fairly relevant at the moment as well. But what do your students think of what you? I mean, do they know what you do, and what do they think of that?
Oh yeah, they do. Yeah, they absolutely love it. So, yeah, they do, and I've had a number of them say that I'm an inspiration. They kind of. They love it because a lot of them are occupational therapy students, and occupation is a big thing for them. So things that people do that are meaningful to them are kind of interesting to occupational therapists. So they love it that I do this. And they usually do a cabaret show at Christmas, the OT Society. So I perform every year for them at Christmas, and I usually do a pole act in the student union, followed by a fire act. And they invited me to perform at the occupational therapy student ball, the graduation ball this year in May. But of course, sadly, that's not happening now because of the situation.
Yeah. But I can imagine them loving you, performing as then they're kind of stuffy librarian professor, and then suddenly performing. Because of course, wasn't Buffy a librarian? I think I can't remember now.
She was.
Yeah, there you go. See, so you can't discount
Yeah.
these librarians.
Yeah.
So if there's anybody who's watching this who wants to ask questions, now's your chance. So if you've got any questions for Hannah, now's your chance. But I'm going to ask you one last question of my own, which is you talked about all the things you've done to date. Is there anything you want to do or like to do, and what else are you planning for the future?
Yes. So I have got a cunning plan, which I'm starting to kind of work on. I've got some ideas for some new acts for this year. The first one is a kind of a Black Widow spider type act. Because I'm really enjoying the lyrapole at the moment. I like it because it's so dynamic, and I feel like it suits me better as a performer. So I'm actually moving more towards that at the moment and trying to explore acts with the lyrapole. So I thought a Black Widow spider type act would be great because the hoop becomes the spider's web.
Yes.
So trying to work out how we can use that hoop. And the other idea I had was for some sort of bird of paradise, where the hoop becomes the bird's perch. But then the other fairly awesome idea I've had is an idea to actually combine the fire performing with the lyrapole. So I need to find somebody who can make me a contraption that I can actually attach to the pole itself, maybe about sort of 2/3 down the way from the hoop, and then have fire sticks that I can actually stick into the contraption so that as the lyrapole turns, there are prongs underneath it with fire coming off. So as I spin, you've got this kind of fire spinning below me. So that's an idea that I've had that I really want to try and make happen this year, really, if possible.
Okay, and outside of performing, is there anything were saying you were addicted to excitement? Is there anything you wanted to try that you can talk about? Obviously.
Well, I suppose the thing that I've never done that I'd really would like to do, there's all sorts of things really I'd like to do, but I would love to do a wing walk. I've always wanted to do a wing walk.
Yeah, funny enough, I can see you on doing a wing walk. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I've always wanted to do that. So that's one thing. But I love travel. There's all sorts of things I want to do, and life's just never going to let me do it all. I need 2 lifetimes to do all the things that I want to do.
That's definitely the way I feel as well. Well, we've got the lovely Gary Nichols with us. Hi, Gary. And he's asking, how did it feel to perform at Comic-Con and bring the event to a standstill?
Oh, God.
So I suppose we should really explain how you came to be performing at a Comic-Con.
Yeah, so I was asked by John and Karen, who obviously they run the Steampunk Emporium at Comic-Con. So I was asked, I had this kind of post-apocalyptic act. It was a real kick-ass act that I did. It was to the Imagine Dragons. It was a tune by the Imagine Dragons called Radioactive. It's a really great tune.
Yeah.
And I put together this act, and it was really cool. And we didn't have a particularly large space. It was the Manchester Comic-Con where I first performed it. And it's not a massive venue. And so I started my performance, and I didn't know that this had even happened until the end, because obviously my brain was in trying not to fall off the pole mode and trying to perform like I do. And anyway, what had happened was that because I was doing what I was doing, and obviously it's a bit of a spectacle, isn't it? Somebody of up there on a pole swinging around.
Yeah.
You know, there's music playing, and people started to stop and actually watch the performance, and it actually blocked up the aisles completely, and it actually created a bit of a safety problem because nobody could go anywhere. It was just, everything just went to complete gridlock while I was performing, which was, we all thought was really quite funny. And then obviously after that I then became a firm part of the Steampunk Emporium team, and it's just a pleasure to do those events. And so I kind of go and I haven't performed there for a little while because the regulations have changed and the way things are done have changed. But because I was doing that all the time, I didn't really have a lot to do. When I wasn't performing, but Gary was always there with the Imaginarium. And because I've been part of that project, I could talk about it. So I ended up sort of being part of the, you know, Imaginarium crew as well at the same time, which is great.
So he was your glamorous assistant then, was he?
Yeah, I think that's the way it turned out, really. Yeah, that seems to be. That's where that came from, really, just because I never had anything to do while I was waiting to perform.
So we had
Gary's assistant.
Yeah. So we've had. No, I was saying he's your glamorous assistant. That's what I was suggesting.
Yeah, of course he is.
So Gail Young has said you mentioned a wing walk. She's suggesting a sponsored wing walk. So
maybe I should.
There's an idea. Yeah. And Stephanie Steampixie is saying, have you ever had a performing accident?
Oh gosh, do you know, I don't think I have. Touch wood. I am one of these people that is quite meticulous, and I suppose in terms of pole, I just don't want to fall off. I really don't. So I tend to try not to. I do have one very funny story, actually, but it's not pole related, where I did have a bit of an accident. I was doing my Alice in Wonderland burlesque act, and I was doing it at a show in Darlington, and it was a really hot summer's night. I mean, it was ridiculously hot, and all of the performers were just melting backstage. And I was a bit concerned about my pasties, which are the very glittery, beautiful kind of circles that people put over their nipples.
Yes, they're not the kind filled with meat and potatoes that
No. No, but we're in the burlesque community. Then they're referred to as pasties. I don't know why, but they are. Anyway, I was on the stage and I was hot, and I just didn't have a good feeling. Sometimes I just didn't have a good feeling at all about my performance. And I went on stage and I kind of had my back to the audience, and I'd taken a piece of clothing off. And as I looked down, I noticed that one of my pasties had actually fallen off. So I kind of gracefully, luckily my back was to the audience, so I gracefully just picked it up and popped it back on and turned around and continued, and then looked down and noticed that the other one had fallen off. And then I picked that up and put that back on, and then the other one on the other side fell off again, and it was just, I couldn't do anything about it. So what can you do?
Yeah. So clearly you're not a shy retiring person when it comes to performing then.
Well, it absolutely wasn't what I want. I mean, that no one wants that to happen to them, but
no.
What can you do? And it was funny, actually. And that's probably the biggest accident performing that I've had.
Have you had any accidents in training?
Oh, to be quite honest, I only ever put I perhaps should put the epic fails onto Facebook, because there are more epic fails than there are perfections. So I tend to video everything I do, just because I can watch it back and I can see my posture, I can see how I look, I can see if something doesn't look right, or if it looks pretty, if the lines are good, etc. So that's why I video everything. So I just meticulously video everything I do. And actually, usually it's taken 6 or 7 videos to actually get it right, to the point where I've got a video that I can actually put onto, that I feel comfortable enough putting on Facebook. But I fall off all the time. I do. And I kind of hurt my hands. My hands are often very sore. You know, you can train for so long and it really hurts your hands after a while. And there are more epic fails than there are anything else. So maybe I'll put some of videos on.
Well, I think it's quite nice that performers and people do admit to them. It's something. It's a conversation I've had with her doctor, Ian Crichton, about making stuff, because the steampunk community is all about making and taking part and having a go and being creative. And that's one of the things I really love about it, is the fact that there's so many people out there doing things that they've never done before and creating stuff. But I think what stops a lot of people is the fact that they think, well, I look at what her doctor does, I look at what Scarlet Butterfly does, and they're perfect, and they don't realise that there's an awful lot of effort and training and trying again that goes into these things. So I think that's very useful for any steampunks out there who want to have a go at doing stuff. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not perfection straight away. So it
takes a lot of dedication and a lot of hard work. Well,
I'm looking to see, I don't think we've got any more questions from people, so I'm going to ask you first of all, do you have any immediate future plans, or is it just going to be carrying on training, developing more acts?
Yeah, I mean, that will take up all of my time, really.
Yeah.
My day job is incredibly busy. It's a very demanding job. You couldn't possibly imagine how much work it is, really. And because I actually work at York St John University, it's actually quite a commute from Huddersfield to York. So that takes up a lot of my time during the week, and my weekends are all about going to events, seeing the steampunk community, going to burlesque shows, and training. And when I'm not training, I'm usually doing the research that I need to do to create costumes. At the moment, I'm trying to work out how to make a cage bra so that I can decorate that and make a really beautiful costume piece. I've no idea where to start with that. So there's a lot of research and a lot of time that goes into that, and then sourcing the materials that I'm going to need to make costume pieces. And it's like having, I've got to be honest, it actually feels like having two jobs. It becomes all consuming. So it really does take up all of the time that I have. And I'm constantly working towards new goals and new acts. And I'm being quite ambitious this year as well. So with all the different ideas that I've got.
Right. Well, if people want to follow you, I've got some links here. So I'm just going to bring these up. So you've got a website, so scarletbutterfly.co.uk. You're on Instagram.
Yes, I'm on Instagram mostly.
Yeah. Instagram would probably, I can imagine you being fairly popular on Instagram. And then we have, you've got a Facebook page, so people can track you down on Facebook and follow you there. And you've been posting up videos of your training and stuff, so that's a good place to follow. And you also obviously have a YouTube channel as well, which has some of your performances and so on. So that's worth checking out. So I'm just putting those up there. The added bonus, it's covering up part of my face, so that's good. But it's been
oh, don't put yourself down.
It's been wonderful to talk to you. I've really enjoyed it, and learning some things about you I didn't know, which is really good. I'm glad to see that you're still training away, no matter how difficult that might be. And so once again, thank you very much for talking to us today, and thanks for talking to us. It's been brilliant. Thank you. And
thank you so much for inviting me. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's been a breath of fresh air to do something different during this lockdown period, when there's, I've been able to get dressed up, and
it's good. It's good. I wear this all the time, obviously. All right. Well, thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So that was the lovely Scarlet Butterfly there, chatting away. It was really nice to talk to her. She's a lovely lady. I've known her for quite a while now. So do follow her. Do check out her website and her Instagram, her Facebook, and her YouTube channels, and you can catch some of her performances there as well. So just to reiterate, this is these interviews are kind of building up to the virtual festival we've got coming up on the 25th, 26th of April, which is Steampunk over Ether. If you've got anything you want to submit to us, then do send it to news@steampaper.co.uk. If it's a big video, you can use WeTransfer, which is a site which allows you to send big files, and you just put in the email address there and it sends it off. It's brilliant. So do that. A couple of things are happening later tonight. I should mention in about 10 minutes' time, Andrew O'Neill, the fabulous Andrew O'Neill, who's the lead singer with, the lead guitarist with the Men. He does do the singing as well, and he's a fantastic comedian. He's one of my all-time favourite comedians. He's doing a live online show at the Art House Virtual Cafe. So, check out Facebook, check out Andrew O'Neill on Facebook, and you should be able to track that down. That's happening at 8 o'clock, so don't miss that. There's a lot of stuff coming up. As I say, we've got some great interviews lined up for you next week, so really don't miss next week. Next week is going to be fun, fab. And then, of course, that following weekend is the Steampunk Over Ether, which, judging by the stuff that's coming in at the moment, is going to be really good fun. Lots of diverse stuff, lots of different stuff. It's going to be really good, and you're all invited. You can all take part. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. Thanks again to the lovely Scarlet Butterfly, and remember, stay splendid and stay safe.